Good day. We have another amazing show here for you today, as well as a fantastic guest. We are looking at how do you hit net zero with today's technologies. Welcome to the Tech and Space Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from leaders of the next frontier. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Jennifer Berthelot-Jelovic. She is the founder of a company called A Sustainable Production, or ASAP, and is now the development director at BranchPattern. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Maybe we can start by having you give us a little bit of background on yourself and talk a little bit about ASAP and BranchPattern.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been working in sustainability and wellness and resiliency for almost 20 years. I like to joke and say, I started when I was 5 years old. And it really is my passion. I founded a sustainable production 13 and a half years ago, and really loved what I was doing. But about 3 years ago, realized I didn't want to be running a company. It was keeping me from doing the work I really loved with clients, going to conferences, speaking engagements, and started the process of finding my next home, and discovered BranchPattern and absolutely fell in love. They provide holistic services, MEP engineering, tech and acoustics, and building science, which includes everything from sustainability, wellness, resilience consulting, testing, commissioning, modeling, and the list literally goes on and on. And it was pretty much just a dream company. I didn't know that someone like them existed that could provide everything I wanted, all the holistic services under one roof, which is really what my clients wanted. And so I've been there almost 6 months and couldn't be happier.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, can you talk a little bit about how that integration between ASAP and BranchPattern worked out and just that focus on deep wellness and as part of a consulting practice and engineering that directly into the built environment?
Sure. What I was really seeing out in the market over the last few years as things evolve, both in the US and around the world, was that clients were really looking for consultants that could provide all the services under one roof, right? Like I was talking about the engineering, acoustics, tech, building science, all of it. And at ASAP, I never grew the company more than 10 people because the more I grew it, the more I had to spend time doing admin and not the stuff I was passionate about. So I spent a lot of time creating partnerships. And when I found BranchPattern, I was like, oh, this is what people are looking for. This is a great way for me to really be able to provide all of those services that people are looking for under one roof, which makes it holistic and seamless and cost effective, and really negates some of the issues that come up on projects when people have different consultants or team members on the design build team or facilities, et cetera, doing that work.
Yeah, yeah. So talk a little bit about the unified vision for the better built environment. What does that look like?
It's funny, we've been talking about this a lot at BranchPattern lately. And I really think one of the things I love about BranchPattern is how purpose-driven the culture is. And so looking at better built environments, it really means that we're improving life through healthier, sustainable, and more resilient spaces for people and planet. And I think we do that through a lot of ways, like human experience and environmental stewardship, technical excellence and customer experience, having collaborative partnerships with tailored solutions that add value and strengthen communities with triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit, and then using value-based actionable deliverables that are informed by data.
Got it, got it. So actually jump into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
How are you using data analytics, IoT sensors, AI? How are these things playing into and supporting these goals?
Okay, so I'm not going to lie. Before I moved to BranchPattern, I barely started using AI. I was super into sensors and data analytics, but I was slightly resisting really diving into AI. And I feel like BranchPattern is really at the forefront of using AI and analytics for our industry with some of our proprietary programs and surveys. And so we do provide testing for, indoor air quality, light, sound, water, acoustics, and all of that. But we also are really using the data-driven building intelligence, like you said, IoT sensors, continuous monitoring, integrating all of that into things like air quality and acoustics and thermal comfort. Some of those things we're doing PV testing, but it might be once or twice a year. Now we're getting that data ongoingly. I think we're doing a lot of portfolio-wide analytics. Something people don't realize is we have more lead volume projects than anyone in the world, which means we are constantly working with portfolios. And because of that, we really want to look at insights that feed into dashboards and support their capital planning and ESG reporting and proactive maintenance without disrupting the clients. And then I think that there's the AI and predictive modeling. So, using performance analytics like AI-driven models, and being able to analyze that data and predict trends and optimize systems, it provides that occupant comfort and energy balance, right? A lot of people wrestle with how do we have both? And then I think something we do really well and might be a little bit unique is ethnographic and human impact modeling. So we have a tool called the HAPPE, it's HAPPE platform, where we combine behavioral research with environmental data so that we can tailor spaces for the neurodiverse needs and cognitive well-being. And so that to me was really exciting that we did that. And then things like adaptive controls, personalization at scale, or the integration with certification and ESG goals. So to wrap that up, essentially, we do combine IoT and AI and advanced analytics with that human-centered research to create spaces that adapt in real time for health, comfort, inclusivity, all while driving the decarbonization and resilience.
Oh my gosh, that's
I know
amazing. It's so much more than you would typically think goes into the built environment. And I think it's so exciting that all of these, health and neurodiversity and all of these things are actually going into the design of buildings today. When you look at the standards, for example, LEED version 5, they're really looking more at that social equity aspect in the built environment. How are you looking at that from a BranchPattern perspective?
Sure. I think we use both WELL and LEED. We think they're great roadmaps for implementation. Of course, we do a ton of other certifications and standards and ratings as well. But, if you look at LEED 5, for instance, they introduced the mandatory human impact assessment, which evaluates things like demographics, health access, occupant experience. And then a lot of that is in the WELL building standard in various ways as well, right? When we look at equity and inclusion in design, there are features or credits in LEED that promote things like universal access and inclusive design, affordable housing. And the WELL building standard has an WELL equity rating. And there's over 40 features in the WELL V2 standard that provide guidance on how to implement DEI efforts. And people ask, are people still doing this? Yes, they are. They might be calling it something else in this country. They may have renamed it, but they are still doing it. And when they're not, they're seeing huge impacts on their bottom line. Community integration. So really encouraging community partnerships, local job access, things like that. So the quality of life pillars that we're seeing in LEED V5, all of those things have been in the WELL building standard for 10 years. So we've been implementing that. And then I think health and wellness beyond energy, right? So WELL and LEED focus on indoor environmental quality, right? Like things like air, water, acoustics, daylight, so that we can improve function, cognitive function, reduce stress, and as I talked about, support neurodiverse needs. So these strategies really enhance corporate social responsibility by protecting those vulnerable populations. And then I think one of the last things is ethical and transparent supply chains. So we've seen in some of those material credits in LEED V5 prioritizing ethical sourcing, social responsibility, and environmental justice. And WELL also does that. They address modern day slavery and supply chains. And then I guess that wasn't my last one. I think the last one would be climate resilience and safety. So integrating climate resilience assessments, looking at how we protect occupants from hazards, making our spaces more safe and resilient. And then we'll also look at that for organizations, making sure they're prepared for events like COVID or climate events and other major impacts. And so I think really like BranchPattern, we work with our clients, developers, owners, so that they can use their buildings as platforms for equity and health and resilience, aligning with their ESG goals, which then strengthens community ties, and they're able to meet standards like LEED v5 and WELL v2 is that third party certification or verification, so that they know that they're not greenwashing or health washing, and that somebody has confirmed that they're doing what they said they were going to do.
Sure. So speaking of ESG, decarbonization obviously is a major goal within the built environment. What are some of the main things that leaders need to be looking at right now to push decarbonization forward in their buildings?
Sure, we have these conversations all the time. I would say if I were to pick, let's say, 3 scalable technology driven strategies that they could deploy and deploy across portfolios rapidly, reduce operational and embodied carbon with a high impact, fast payback, and then strong portfolio level scalability. Because I think that's what's really important. A lot of things have changed. We're not just looking at buildings, we're looking at entire portfolios and communities now. The first one is going to be AI analytics driven energy optimization. So looking at that operational carbon, it's fast and scalable. So there's no major construction. It works with old and new construction existing, which is important because most of our buildings are existing. And it begins saving carbon in the moment that it's deployed, right? So that could be things like AI powered building automation, or something called FDD, real time fault detection and diagnostics. That's why we call it FDD, because it's a mouthful. Advanced submetering and digital twins, machine learning, load forecasting, and on average, that could result in anywhere between a 10 to 30% reduction in operational carbon within months, and then a rapid payback, often less than 2 years. So it's also extremely scalable across portfolios. So I think that's my first one. My second one would be probably electrification, and maybe they switch orders, but I think electrification and smart heat pump upgrades, which seems odd maybe, but that takes into account operational and future carbon avoidance, which I think is incredibly important. And again, it's fast and scalable. So the equipment replacements can be phased out across a portfolio as part of that normal capital cycle. And the tech, I think, is mature and works in almost all of the US climates at this point. It might differ, in other countries. So this would be things like air source or VRF heat pumps, induction. I just stumble on that one. Induction and electric alternatives, grid interactive equipment, and then phased electrification planning software. So these results sometimes are as high as 30 to 60% reduction in operational carbon over the life of the asset, right? So it's a little bit longer, but that's a huge reduction in operational carbon. And it also eliminates future stranded fossil fuel infrastructure, which is incredibly important to these portfolio owners.
Yeah. With all of these considerations in mind, obviously there's a lot to think about and a lot to take into consideration as
Yeah.
you're either retrofitting an existing building or building a brand new building or environment, I guess broader environment. How how do organizations kind of eat this, this giant piece of cake, right? It just is so much to think about. What's your approach to kind of getting started?
Great question. It's interesting because, like with BranchPattern, we provide so many services, which was my dream, right? To be able to provide all the services, but that can be like drinking from a fire hose when you're trying to help a client understand all their options. So, what I learned a very long time ago, it's quite simple. It's just listen. Don't approach a client or potential client or a project with an agenda. Come in and ask questions, get in their world, and then actually listen to what they are saying. So learn their commitments, their constraints, their fears, hesitations, like what is actually driving their interest in sustainability, wellness, or resilience. And then don't overwhelm them. Like I said, we have pages of our services that we provide at BranchPattern. So after listening and getting in their world, it's like offering them options that address everything I just learned during that discovery, right? I want them to feel comfortable that I first heard them. I'm not just there to sell them something, and that I'm committed to supporting their goals without impacting their timelines and budgets, right? Two of the most important things, for developers, owners is their timeline and their budget. And then show them that they're in capable hands, through experience, knowledge, and being solution oriented. They will have a lot of those issues, concerns, hesitations, and having experience so that you can share with them how you may have approached that on a previous project, on a previous portfolio that's solution oriented, really helps to mitigate some of those concerns they may have, because it's making it all about them, right? If you listen, they're going to tell you everything you need to know to best support them. And I think as humans, we don't always listen. We come in ready to share without really getting in their world first.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned resilience, I think, earlier on, and as you know, there's so many climate impacts right now, wildfires, floods, all of these things that are out there, and you've talked a little bit about resilience. Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of it being sort of a passive measure to an active integrated component of a sustainable design?
Yeah, that was a really great way to state that. I think resilience is becoming proactive, predictive, and integrated. We really went from like this static thing to dynamic. So in the past, like we hardened the building to withstand a single event, right? Like seismic upgrades or fire rated materials. But now we're using real time data, predictive analytics, and adaptive systems to anticipate events and really dynamically adjust the building operations. And then this results in like resilience becoming an active operational strategy. It's not just a design feature anymore. And then I think by integrating carbon and resilience, it's a dual benefit design approach. So climate risks are now so interconnected. We can't just treat mitigation and adaptation separately. Resilience measures now they commonly double as sustainability strategies, right? Like I mentioned, electrification and heat pumps, or microgrids and battery storage and on-site solar, or high performance envelopes. Sustainability and resilience have merged, so they really reinforce one another. And then I think our site planning has shifted. So we're now designing for those things you talked about: water, heat, fire. They're normal conditions. Resilience-driven site planning isn't anymore just about those rare events. It's about our baselines, right? Like we have to design for water and flood resilience and heat resilience and fire resilience. That site becomes our first line of defense, and it's now an active environmental asset. And then I think last is like operational systems are now acting as those resilience engines. So those building operations are now designed to be autonomous and flexible and recoverable with, whether it's distributed energy resources or smart controls or advanced filtration or water system redundancy. And I think a lot of this is driven by technology, sensors, AI. So resilience, again, it's no longer passive preparedness, it's active, continuous climate management.
Yeah. When you're looking at sustainable design, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but from a strategy perspective, but now let's look at it from a capital cost perspective. And when, as a leader that's managing a whole portfolio of commercial real estate, for example, they look at the cost of this. How do you talk about, I guess, the ROI and how that can really make this a very important strategy to move forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, actually. So one of my favorite slides that I use in, I think, every deck I ever do, it addresses the annual budget of an organization, right? So on average, an organization spends about 1% of their annual budget on energy. And then they spend 9% of their annual budget on rent and operations. And then they spend approximately 90% of their annual budget on the people, right? Salary, benefits. So if they can impact or improve that 90%, it's going to have a huge impact on their annual budget and ROI. And if you're thinking about the last 20 years, we've spent so much time focused on that 1% energy and how to move that, as opposed to really focusing on that 90%. So when we first started selling Well, and I was one of the first Well APs in the world, so I was doing this before it was released to the world in 2014. I started doing Well in 2012. We were trying to sell it by the square foot, the same way we had sold sustainability or lead, right? And we learned very quickly that human-centered spaces can't be focused on a square foot ROI. So I think high-performance human-centered spaces are not a construction cost. They're a workforce performance engine. So their ROI comes from reducing your two biggest expenses, which are your people and your operations. So when you improve your air quality, acoustics, thermal comfort, daylight, and flexibility, all the things we've talked about, you recover hours of lost productivity per employee, you increase retention, shorten recruitment cycles, you reduce absenteeism, or even worse, presenteeism, which a lot of people don't even think about, right? It's that hidden part of the iceberg. And it really flattens out operating costs for 20 to 30 years. So that's a huge long-term ROI. And the return just isn't measured in kilowatts or square feet, right? It's measured in talent and innovation and business resilience. And when you share it this way, it typically lands. So we've been much more successful changing that narrative.
Wow, I'm on board. I'm ready.
Yeah.
You convinced me. That is an amazing perspective, and yeah, fantastic. So looking forward to the next decade, what do you see as kind of the specific technology, material innovations, regulatory changes that we might see coming down the pike?
Okay. So at first, this sounded like a tough one for a lot of reasons, right? These things vary by country, state, city. In our country, it's very politically driven, whereas in other countries, it's not the case. It's merely science and data. And then as I thought about it, I was like, oh, wait, this is easy. It's AI. I think within 10 years, I think the most disruptive factor isn't going to be a single material or a single regulation. It's going to be that autonomous AI-driven building system tightly integrated with low carbon infrastructure and smart materials. So it's going to fundamentally redefine how we design, operate, and value our buildings. And I could get very into all of the different ways that is going to occur in my mind over the next 10 years. But that could be a whole nother episode.
Well, maybe we'll have to do that because, yeah, you've piqued my interest. I'm ready to learn more. So, yeah, we would love to have you back on the show again in the future. So let's put that on the future interview schedule. In any case, thank you so much for being here today. If someone wanted to learn more about BranchPattern, what should they do?
Yeah. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us at branchpattern.com. You can go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm constantly posting about BranchPattern. BranchPattern has a LinkedIn page that's constantly posting what our team is up to all over the world, where we're speaking, and the fantastic projects and portfolios we're working with.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for making time to be here today. I know you have a crazy schedule, so it was wonderful that you could join us and really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I do want to take a moment to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, you can visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Tech and Space Leaders Show.